Here are 3 things I learned on my 3rd hike of the JMT. This past August was my 3rd time hiking the John Muir Trail, and here are 3 things that I learned just this year, plus one additional bonus thing I'll mention at the end. The first thing I learned this year is that the sun treats everyone differently. This was my first time hiking the JMT with another person, Jewelweed, and I found out that we had different experiences with the sun. On previous hikes, I was able to get by with just sun protection like hat, long sleeve shirt, sun gloves, covering everything other than my legs. And I just never got any sort of sunburn on my legs other than occasionally a little bit above my knees. So just a little bit of sunscreen was enough to just cover up there, and that's all I really needed for the entire trip. Well, it turned out that Jewelweed's legs reacted much differently to the sun and required a lot of sunscreen throughout to keep them from getting burned. So luckily during the first half of our trip, we passed several places like the Tuolumne Meadow Store, Red's Meadow, and VVR, so we were able to purchase additional sunscreen. But even so, we started to run low towards the end of the trip. Luckily there were some PCT hikers that we were hiking with, and they were kind enough to let us use some of the sunscreen they had. I have a few videos that I've already posted that go over everything that I've kind of used to protect myself from the sun, and I'd recommend checking those out if you haven't already seen them. The second thing I learned this year is that the crowds change every year and probably every night out on the JMT. I planned some of this year's days on trail based on areas that were previously crowded, as well as areas that were previously not crowded. Once we arrived at some of these places, I found them to be exactly opposite of what I was expecting. The first night at the Clouds Rest Junction, we arrived when Julie was sick on that first day and it was getting dark. I was worried we'd have trouble finding a spot since it had been packed in previous years. Luckily there was only one other group there when we arrived late, and we had no trouble at all finding a spot. On the other hand, I've had good luck at Upper Cathedral Lake, and I've had minimal other campers there. But when we arrived there on the second night, there were people everywhere, and it took us a while to find a spot that wouldn't be right on top of other people. So unless you really go off trail, it can be tough to know whether a spot will be crowded or not. I think generally it's pretty safe to assume that some of the popular lakes are going to be crowded and just some of the more scenic spots and areas, but it's not guaranteed. You could get there and be the only one, or just have very minimal amount of other people, or you could just get to random spots and expect nobody to be there and have them absolutely packed with people. You just really don't know. The third thing that I learned this year is that conditions can change by the day. We had a few scares as far as conditions went, and I was concerned that they would impact our entire hike. The first was smoke. We had one day where there was a thick haze, and I was concerned that this would impact the rest of our trip, like what had happened to me on previous trips. This ended up just being a one-day thing and didn't impact the rest of our trip at all. The other thing is storms. We had several days of absolute perfect weather, but then we had a few days, one after the other, where afternoon storms came in and made it difficult or dangerous to get over the passes. Since we were on a tight schedule with time, this could have impacted our ability to complete the trail. There were a few storms where we just barely got over the passes before they came through. The last thing is the overall temperatures. We had some nights where there was frost on the ground, or snow, and others where it was warm to sleep. Even the elevation didn't seem to make much difference for these days. Some nights at lower elevation were cooler than nights at higher elevation. So it's good to be prepared for different conditions on every day. And I'll add that out of the 3 years I've hiked this trail, my experiences were totally different each year due to the various conditions. And that leads me to my final bonus point, which is that this trail never gets old. Just like I've mentioned, each year that I've hiked this trail, the conditions were very different. I was also at a different place in my life each time that I've hiked the trail, and all these things together have just made for much different experiences each time. But the biggest thing and the biggest reason that this trail never gets old for me is that it's just absolutely beautiful. Every day, every mile, in my opinion, is just gorgeous. There are some challenging sections, but I found that in some years these sections were more enjoyable and more challenging than others, all kind of just depending how you're feeling that day and that moment. But from my experience, each year and each day are different, and they're all incredible in their own unique way, and it never gets old. Alright, well that's it for 3 things that I learned on my 3rd time hiking the JMT. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.